The Supreme Court is set to hear oral arguments in a case of the Colorado cake baker who refused to bake a cake for a gay wedding because of his strong Christian beliefs. Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Spirited Debate. I'm Lauren Green. It is one of the most highly anticipated high court cases. Jack Phillips, owner of Masterpiece Cake Shop, versus the state of Colorado, which is arguing that Phillips is in violation of discrimination and civil rights laws. Those on the side of Phillips say this is a precedent-setting religious liberty case. But those siding with the two gay men, Charlie Craig and David Mullins, say it's about discrimination and equal treatment under the law. Here to debate, Dr. Frank Turek, president of CrossExamined.org and author of I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, and Christopher Hale, founder of the Francis Project. Welcome to you both.
Thanks for having us.
You know, it's interesting.
Thanks,
It's interesting because as we've gotten closer to the date of the oral arguments, the stories and op-eds against the baker have actually increased. I mean, so this case is a clear case of religious liberty, or is it a civil rights issue? Frank, what's your take?
Well, I think they're both, Lauren. I think religious liberty is a civil rights issue as well as the freedom of speech. I mean, the issue really here is can the government compel speech? Can it force you to advocate or to oppose certain issues? Can it override your free speech and religious liberty protections? That's the very question here, and that's what the court's going to have to decide. And let me just say, this is what happens when the Supreme Court intervenes and imposes a decision that's not in the Constitution, because marriage itself is not in the federal Constitution. They imposed it on the nation, and now we have these conflicts that need to be resolved by the very court which created the conflict to begin with.
You know, speaking of the conflict, the baker actually has lost 40% of his business because he stopped making wedding cakes altogether. And then the same-sex couple says, they said, his religious beliefs should not trump their civil rights rights. So, Christopher, what do you think?
I disagree here. I honestly think when you enter into the public arena, a public business, there's going to be certain norms and aspects that are put on you, including non-discrimination. I'm from Tennessee. In the 1960s, oftentimes in Tennessee, store owners would refuse to serve African Americans, claiming religious principle because they were a quote against interracial marriage from a quote-unquote Christian perspective. Our ability to practice our faith should be free and open. However, we have to mirror that with the ability to enter into a civil society where everyone's treated equally. Here's the real issue. Going forward, this question of social equality and religious liberty will be the biggest issue that the Supreme Court takes up over the next 25 years. We need creative solutions. I think if you look to Utah, they have a good creative solution. I've seen a lack of innovation where we can protect both religious liberty and promote social equality, and I want to see that going forward.
Frank, I want you to answer that, because one of the things that always comes up when we're talking about gay marriage and civil rights in this case is the issue of African Americans and the civil rights that they endorse. So I want you to answer some of those hot button issues.
Sure. Well, this is unlike interracial marriage because there's no reasonable grounds to be against interracial marriage. You still have a man and a woman coming together to have children to perpetuate and stabilize society. But in same-sex marriage, you don't have that. So there are reasonable grounds to be against that kind of behavior, but not necessarily the kind of behavior with regard to interracial marriage, because race has no impact on your behavior. But sexuality is a behavior. Homosexuality is a behavior. So the question is, and this is what the court is going to have to decide, whose rights take precedence? Because obviously Jack Phillips, the baker here, has rights as well. So whose rights are going to take precedence? Now, I'd like to ask Christopher a question. And Christopher, do you think that a gay T-shirt maker should be forced by the government to print up anti-gay T-shirts?
Okay.
And so it's a hypothetical, of course, and the broader point is I do think that when you enter into the public arena, when you have a business setting, it's not just simply an act of speech. It's actually an act of commerce, of interstate commerce. And I think the Constitution communicates that there's different prerequisites for entering into this. It's not just about speech. So I agree it's going to create some complicated situations. But the bottom line principle is there are ways to go around this where this Christian baker can operate in the public sphere, and someone in a same-sex marriage can receive products and services. In terms of the particularities of that, that's for the court to decide. My issue is I don't think we have been innovative enough in resolving this issue. And I think going forward, it's going to be something we have to figure out as a community together.
I wish we could talk more about this, but we've run out of time. Thanks so much, Christopher Hale and Frank Turek. This case, of course, is not going to end even when after the Supreme Court hears the oral arguments. Thanks so much for being on A Spirited Debate.
Thanks for having us.
And also check out my podcast, Lighthouse Faith, Moving Forward in Truth and Love. I'm Lauren Green. Thanks for watching.